Good morning. I'm Rebecca Spike-Kaiser, Associate Deputy Administrator for Policy Integration at NASA, which is a fancy way to say that I am Lori Garver, the Deputy Administrator's deputy. Welcome so much. Thank you all for coming. We have a fabulous event for you today. And we are starting with a wonderful set of panelists and a keynote speech by Lori Garver. I'll get into that a little bit in a second. Let me start by welcoming you all. I understand that we have folks who have traveled from near and far to come to this event. There's a group of women here who drove down from Albany. We have folks from Texas. We have folks from Florida. And we have Lori Garver, who traveled across the Atlantic last night to join us. So thank you all very much. Let me start with some logistical arrangements. We are going to have our opening panel until 10:30. We break from 10:30 to 11. And then we're going to have breakout sessions that start at 11 a.m. and run until lunchtime, till noon. For the breakout sessions, we have, you all have name tags and they're color-coded for your breakout session. And those that signed up for Flash Mentoring, you will be in rooms 402 to 404, and you have a green sticker. A yellow sticker is in 413 and 414. Red is in room 301, and blue is here in the Jack Morton Auditorium. We have lots of volunteers and folks around to ask questions. If you have any questions, please ask them, and they will direct you to the right place. We ask that you do stay in that particular breakout session for the entire session, because we have a lot going on in each one. And then Boeing, thank you very much, is hosting a lunch, which is available downstairs. And there's limited seating downstairs, but we encourage people to eat outside. It's beautiful weather today, and there is some seating downstairs as well, or over in the Marvin Center, which is just across the street. Bathrooms are located downstairs. The exits are behind you, and during the break, people are welcome to congregate downstairs where there are tables set up. And if you get lost or have any questions, just look for our staff volunteers, and they're identified by name badges and tags. We also hope that you take some time to experience the liquid galaxy. And that's a chance to fly around the world in seconds. You can sign up at the registration desk if you haven't already, and it's available for people to sign up and participate in all day. So the Liquid Galaxy is something to demonstrate the power of data visualization at NASA. It's really exciting. It's part of our Open Government Initiative. And Tektronix Software and our NASA team recently led a technology demonstration project to construct Google's open source immersive visualizer. And we call it Liquid Galaxy, which is much easier to say than all that. This is a demonstration project that allows you to fly anywhere in the world in seconds using the Google Earth platform. It's way cool. Please try it out. It's downstairs. So now, let me get to our fabulous program. And we're going to start with our keynote speaker, NASA Deputy Administrator Lori Garver. Lori Garver was confirmed by the Senate in July 2009, and she's second in command at NASA. I could say a lot about what Lori does because she does a lot. And she is what I call the policy goddess of NASA. I don't know if that's okay to say, PGN, okay to say as an acronym. Yeah, is that all right? Okay, Policy Goddess of NASA. I like how Jeff Mamber describes Lori. Says she's been underestimated many times, but has maintained a laser-like focus in her determination to effect change in the U.S. space program. That pretty much describes Lori. And that's what Lori has done throughout her career, her long career in space. And I don't know what else I can say besides the fact that she's my personal mentor. She's a fabulous boss. She keeps her sense of humor, and she has a lot of fabulous things to say. So let me turn to Lori Garver. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. It is a pleasure to be here, and I really want to thank you for pulling this together. I guess for a long time the saying was, behind every great man is an even greater woman. So you're a greater woman any time. You are the true policy goddess at NASA, and I typically am able to just go about my business because you're there. Doing the really hard work. So this is a great day that we've looked forward to a long time. I know that it is something that we, in my view, maybe don't address often enough at NASA. When I came to NASA, in fact, I really had an intention to not be just, the woman at NASA, and not only specifically speak at women's conferences and so forth. And almost 3 years into it, as I was talking with folks last night on the way back from my travel, like, I think you've got a broad enough portfolio, as Rebecca said. Nobody feels you've pigeonholed yourself or been pigeonholed into just women's issues. Well, just women's issues, as Rebecca said, if we're talking about change at NASA, I believe they're related. There are a number of tough questions in this regard that still go unanswered, and I hope that today we can talk about them. Just the title of the day-long activity itself, Women, Innovation, and Aerospace. I think a lot of people question, what do women even have to do with innovation, and why should those be tied together? Among the most provocative questions, then, are specifically the importance of collaboration and innovation, and are women more likely to be collaborative? Are we unique in that regard? As other government agencies update their own workplace flexibility policies for the 21st century, what are some of the things we're doing today that 50 years from now we shouldn't be doing anymore? And how many of those issues relate to women? How do those of us specifically in the government advance new ideas in a system that is bureaucratic and structured really to protect the status quo? That is something that we want to be able to address this morning. And throughout the day, we're going to highlight and celebrate the strides we've made, while I think acknowledging that we still have a ways to go. There is a natural tension between those two types of views. I know many people, and as I got the research for this speech, wanted me to highlight all of the progress we have made. And that is a great thing to do, and I'm going to spend some time on that. But perhaps we can agree to really try to focus on how we can accelerate that progress we've made for the future. Right off the bat, 25 years ago, when I was just entering the field, it would have been harder to even convene so many women, and certainly such a panel of accomplished women in our field. And we can be proud of the fact that NASA is the largest employer of women in STEM fields, with over 6,000 women who hold jobs at NASA of our 18,000 person workforce. Well, as Rebecca noted, I was overseas till last night, but you would maybe take from that I was in Europe, across the Atlantic. I was only 2 hours into the Atlantic in Bermuda. I signed an agreement for a tracking station in Bermuda. It was something that we need for the Antares vehicle, fly out of Wallops. It's been several years since we've had the tracking station there. It's been a 2-year arranged agreement, a short trip, but it was a very interesting thing to do. The premier of Bermuda is a woman, met with her, sat in Parliament yesterday morning, a significant percentage women. The U.S. consulate is a woman. I spoke at a school where the attendees were the top science award winners. That's how they were selected to come to my presentation, and they were predominantly women. And I couldn't help but think then when I admit that, as is typical, I would say, the last minute look at the remarks that people had worked on for me were primarily all these strides we had made. And I'm going to go over some of those strides, and then I'm going to see if you felt the way I did as we note them. You know, you can use statistics to say just about anything, right? So over the last decade, we've seen significant increases in several categories. The number of women supervisors at NASA has increased 59%. The number of women aerospace engineers increased 76%. As I read that, it didn't seem to have a lot of meaning to me, right? Yes, we've increased, but what is it? Is it over 50%? Do we have 50% plus leaders at NASA as women or as engineers? 29% of NASA women in the leadership, and only 20% are engineers. 20% of NASA engineers are women. 22% of just NASA AST employees are women. So yes, let's celebrate the strides, but let's acknowledge we have some distance to go. The next thing that I was asked to do was highlight our progress. And so how do we highlight our progress? We talk about all those women who are at NASA making a difference. And the list said the principal investigator of the New Star mission is a woman. The principal investigator of Grail is a woman. A woman leads the team responsible for the beautiful images you see of Cassini sending them back from Saturn. Women play key roles in the heliophysics division. Our CFO is a woman, our CIO, our deputy's deputy. And of course, their last one, we've launched 53 women in space. Okay, so again, that is great. That is wonderful. I have tried to do everything possible to, our head of HR is a woman, she's sitting right here, to expand those opportunities. But what percentage? Okay, of NASA's senior management team of 40, we have 6 women. How many center directors? 1 of 9. No mission directorates. We've flown 53 women in space, but how many people have gone into space? How many Americans? 500, so it's 10%. Sometimes we also, in order to feel real good about our progress, like to talk about how bad it used to be, right? So how far we've come. So one of the highlights, so organized for me, was that in 1968 we had Miss NASA beauty contests. They even sent me pictures from the newsletters of the centers with Miss NASA. We don't do that anymore. Good for us, good for us. Most striking was a memo that one of our folks who's here, I won't identify her, came across from 1970. And she sent it out to several of the senior leaders saying, look how far we've come. Just remember how far we've come. The subject of the memo says pantsuits. And it is 2 all Goddard gals from 1970. It says it, and it's written by a woman. She has been questioned about her reaction to pantsuits in our offices at Goddard. There are many pros and cons on the subject. In fact, it's as loaded as the MIDI versus the Mini. On one side of the coin, I have to face you girls and your desire to be mod. And on the other, the male population who would vote only for minis. There are many factors that should be considered by you gals in how you dress. Professional memo from 1970. And it goes on about the things you should consider, and I'm not going to go into some of them are so inappropriate, like how you look from behind. But I believe you are all aware of proper dress for offices. Pantsuits are becoming acceptable in most places. If you feel that a pantsuit would not be offensive to your boss and would not embarrass him when he has outside visitors, I see no objection to your wearing such outfits. But bear in mind, if someone forgets to treat you like a lady, it was you who elected to wear the pants. Now, It sounds funny, and we like, again, to talk about how far we've come. And it seems hard today to imagine a culture where such attitudes were commonplace. But we have a varied reaction to this memo, in my view. Rebecca read parts of it as senior staff the other day. And of course, the most common response was laughter. And I would say that is a most typical response for men, especially men who remember it, maybe a little fondly. Then there is that response of, I think, women younger, and even Rebecca, significantly younger than me. It's a little shocking. It's like hard to imagine living in that time. And then there's me. I don't know if there are others like me who I find it a little sad, and in some ways it makes me angry. We cannot accept that it's okay for us to be like this. I think many of the issues that are more directly related to this topic today, we laugh about and find funny, but we need to take seriously. I certainly wasn't allowed to wear pants in elementary school. I loved gym day because you could wear shorts under your skirt. But we were making advances at that time in this country. And I think that in 1970, of course, we even had marches and women's rights for equality strike that Betty Friedan organized in Washington, tens of thousands of women. And yet this was still going on at NASA. So my concern is, where are the pantsuit memos today? And how can we make sure that we're this time being more inclusive of women so that we can not look back and laugh in the future. When I was in high school, I had finished all the math that you can take by junior year. There were 6 of us, the other 5 were boys, and I came back senior year and found that the boys had all been invited and were enrolled in math at the university up the street. My parents were never contacted, and my mom called the school and asked how come I hadn't been included in calculus at the university, and they said, well, because she's a girl, we figured she wasn't going to go into math. And my mom was angry. My home economics mom was angry, and I am my mother's daughter. So let's recognize that we're probably not at the point where we have complete equal opportunity. We have a long ways to go. But to celebrate the progress is important. In so many areas, what we do, I like to make sure we are celebrating the progress. So how does this involve innovation? We like to believe that at NASA, we are all about innovation. We had a senior management council meeting fairly recently where we talked about our best day. The facilitator said, look back at NASA and what is the day you are most proud of? And it was unanimously, surprisingly, not the day we landed on the moon. It was Apollo 13. The NASA leadership team felt that that best symbolized a coming together, a collaboration, an innovation to solve something differently. We're all about innovation. So are we really? In the beginning, I think it was easy to be about innovation. It's the first time you're doing anything. Of course you have to be innovative to do it. I was recently at Columbia University speaking with students who'd done a project on innovation, actually for NASA. They started with a project with a definition of innovation, is that taking ideas that have already been successful and then combining them in new ways to address new challenges. So if you have new challenges, of course you have to be innovative about how to solve them. But today we have a lot of the same challenges, and NASA needs to go about solving them in new ways. And how do you do that with the same kind of people? You probably need a more diverse workforce and people who think about things differently. So we have still many new questions to answer, to take on new challenges that we should be doing in new ways. And of course, one of those is how to tap into that full potential of a diverse workforce. There are lots of great examples of things we're doing innovative at NASA and in government. But if we agree that it's at the very core of our purpose, our own vision, then how can we do more? So we need to break down existing barriers, and some of those have to do with how we work with women. Again, if the definition is to do things in new ways, then think differently. To innovate, we need diversification of perspective. And while women have been contributing more and more to so many fields, we still have a ways to go in our own field. Women make up over half the population, but only 1/3 of the NASA workforce. Women earn 80% of bachelor's degrees awarded in engineering and computer sciences. Oh, men actually do, of course, not women. Women comprise only 25% of STEM jobs. Why is that okay? Maybe we've grown a little complacent. Maybe we've accepted things a little too early. So let's ask today, are we doing everything we can to provide equal opportunities and incentives for women to enter these fields, to enter NASA, and to enter government generally? Are we adopting innovative strategies to recruit and retain women? And what are those pantsuit memos of today, those issues out there that maybe some of us are just so glad we don't have to wear skirts anymore that we're not as attuned to the barriers that still exist? Maybe we don't innovate as much as we think we do or used to do at NASA. And maybe NASA needs women to help them do this as much as women need NASA. Does our culture accept women fully? Are there things that we are doing unintentionally that should be changed? I know even on the 9th floor at NASA, when 3 or more of us women get together and a man walks by, it's often, whoa, whoa, I'm in trouble. What'd I do? What's going on? Oh my goodness. If we thought every time 3 men were talking that there was some subversive behavior going on, we would not be able to sleep at night. What about comments on our clothes? What about comments on our hair? I'll just go on the record now. It's not okay to ask me about my hair color, my hairstyle, any more than it would be okay for me to talk about your decreasing hairline. These are small cultural norms that need to change. And the bigger issue to me, though, continues to be whether or not we are accepting of women who have children, make that choice to have a family. Now, I know that this is a tough issue, and not everybody chooses to have children. In fact, many of people my age had to make a choice. So that's what I think is not okay. If you choose not to have children for any reason, and by the way, don't be asking about that either. That's another question we don't want to talk about with you. But those of us who do choose to have a family should not have to choose between that and a career any more than a man would have to choose between the two. The flexible workplace that we want to talk about at NASA has been considered, oh, that's a gender-neutral topic. That doesn't have anything to do with women's issues. Well, I want to live in that world, and I hope that in 50 years when we look back, we do, and that a statement that said flexible workplace policy matters more for women today looks like that pantsuit memo. But we don't live in that world today. 83% of single parents are women. The percentage of fathers who stay at home, you hear articles, right? More and more fathers staying at home, 2.7%. Working mothers spend 21 hours a day on average with their children. Working fathers spend 9 hours a day on their children. And that was on an article on how great it is fathers are spending more time with their children. So are we there yet? Maybe not. How many men are asked if it was hard to decide to go back to work after having kids? I am asked that at every mentoring session for the last 20 years. Happy to answer it, by the way. And it's only asked of women still today. How can we tap into the potential of women who don't want to make that choice, who want to continue to have a career, or even those women who step out of their career for a year or maybe 20 years and want to come back? Are we doing everything we can to tap into their potential? A number of those women are friends of mine. I'm telling you that they could change the world. They are innovative. They have a different and unique perspective. So maybe the problem is that we've taken a bit too much credit for our slow process and settled progress and settled a little bit too early. Every time a shuttle launched with one or maybe two women, oh, we're doing great. Okay, let's, no one ever really wanted to take seriously that all-female crew. But I definitely feel like, although I am my mother's daughter and these things are of great concern to me, that today what we want to talk about are the issues and the ways that we can break not only cultural barriers, but these very real workforce barriers. We at NASA want to continue to lead innovation in the future to make sure that NASA and the American industry and the nation's technology sector continue to benefit from the ideas and talents and insights of all of us. So today, we'll celebrate those achievements and also acknowledge that what we really need is a more accepting culture, a more forward-leaning and innovative policies in order to benefit from the full potential of women in the workforce, which I believe will in turn allow NASA and all of us in the aerospace community to continue to provide the most advanced and innovative aerospace programs in the world. So I look forward to the discussion, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Lori. That was incredible, and it raises a lot of questions and issues. I think a very poignant statement, what is going to be our pantsuits memo that we're going to look at 30 years down the line and think, oh, what were they thinking? We now have our wonderful panel where we are going to be talking about these issues regarding women and innovation. I'm going to start by introducing our panel members, and then each panel member is going to give a short anecdote about either being a woman in the workplace or about something regarding innovation in the workplace or the lack thereof. We welcome the questions. We want this to be a dialogue. We want this to be a discussion. There are tweeters out there, and we welcome tweet questions. We welcome questions from the audience. So after the anecdotes are given, please feel free to come up to the microphone in the middle, and there are also handheld microphones that our facilitators are going to have on each side. So look for the microphones, and please do ask questions. So let me get to the right page here. Kathy Sullivan is Deputy Administrator at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Dr. Sullivan was appointed on May 2nd, 2011, by President Barack Obama as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Environmental Observation and Prediction and Deputy Administrator for NOAA. She provides agency-wide direction for satellites, space weather, water, and ocean observations and forecasts to best serve American communities and businesses. And Dr. Sullivan was one of the first 6 women selected to join the NASA Astronaut Corps in 1978 and holds the distinction of being the first American woman to walk in space. Catherine Kitty Didion is Senior Fellow at the National Academy of Engineering. And Dr. Didion's portfolio includes the Diversity of the Engineering Workforce Program, providing leadership to the National Academy of Engineering's efforts to enhance the diversity of the engineering workforce at all levels. In addition to her duties at the National Academy of Engineering, Kitty is the director of the Committee on Women in Science, Engineering, and Medicine, mandated as a focal point on gender across the 3 national academies. And she served as executive director for the Association for Women in Science for 14 years. Marcia Smith is president of SpacePolicyOnline.com and Space and Technology Group, LLC. She's the president I just said that, and the founder and editor of SpacePolicyOnline.com. She spent 31 years on Capitol Hill as a specialist in science and technology policy for the Congressional Research Service. And after that, spent 3 years at the National Academy of Sciences. And Veronica Villalobos is director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at the Office of Personnel Management. She was appointed to the Senior Executive Service in October 2010 and currently holds the position of Director, Office of Diversity and Inclusion. In that capacity, she manages OPM's government-wide diversity effort to develop, drive, and monitor strategies and initiatives designed to create a more diverse and inclusive federal workforce. So, an incredibly distinctive panel. Before I go into the anecdotes, let me read a definition of innovation. And the definition that I'm going to read is from a recent report on innovation in government that was issued by the Partnership for Public Service and the company IDEO. Innovation is defined as the process of improving, adapting, or developing a product, system, or service to deliver better results and create value for people. And innovation in government can come in 3 forms. Improving something you already do to deepen your agency's impact on people's lives, adapting a tried and true idea to a new context, or developing something entirely new to achieve your agency's goals. So that's what we're thinking as far as innovation. And now let me turn to our panelists. Kathy, should I turn to Kathy first? You want to do your anecdote?
Well,
All right.
So I already gave some anecdotes, and won't take my full 5 to 7 minutes here. But because I'm sitting next to Kathy, and Sherry told me this isn't hers because she has so many more than this, my anecdote is about NASA's decision as we look to external vehicular space suits, when you went on spacewalks, and I'm sitting here next to the first woman who ever went on a spacewalk, folks, or American woman, sorry.
Svetlana would be so mad.
Svetlana, that's right. And NASA had, not unlike today, considerations on the budget, and it was determined that we couldn't afford the small, medium, and large suit, so the decision was to make only the medium suits, which would, of course, accommodate well, initially it was medium. I'm told this is the slide. Medium and large, right from the beginning. No small suits, which made some percentage of the women, obviously not Kathy, not able to wear the suits or go on a spacewalk. We have since even gone ahead and developed the extra large suit because we were accommodating even many of the men but never built the small suit. Now today, you cannot go on the space station for a space flight without being able to be in a spacesuit. In the beginning, of course, you could go on shuttle missions, you just couldn't do an EVA. But now that decision is keeping women who are astronauts from even going to space. Unintended consequence, I raised this at a senior management council meeting last year on innovation and diversity as just an example of unintended consequence. People were unaware, even Charlie, that it happened, but Mike Coates was right there, acknowledged it did, and I'm told Charlie is working on it.
So that's exactly right, and as one of the first 6 women to join the astronaut corps, you might be able to imagine I have a long list. We could be here till around this time tomorrow with stories that were amusing and sometimes frustrating in coming aboard NASA at that time. It was 1978. And the 35 of us came on stage for the welcome and introduction to the public at large. We ranged from 26-year-old recently minted PhDs, there were 3 of us, to 39-year-old scientists and engineers. And the composition was 6 women 3 African Americans, 1 Asian American. So we did the introduction, the little formal remarks, and from something like 10:30 in the morning until whenever the appetites were sated, we were in what was called media availability, which means whatever interviews anybody wants to do. So that started at about 10:30. At about 10:40, 25 of our class was out the door off to go do other things, and the 6 women, 3 African Americans, and Asian American were in the mill doing press availability. And so there arose after that day a common moniker in our class that if you take it by the evidence that the media provided that day, our class consisted of 10 interesting people and 26 standard white guys. So that was sort of the buzz. Lori mentioned the pantsuit memo. There was one senior woman there were a few senior women at the Johnson Space Center at the time that they were preparing to bring aboard a class that would include strange people. And so the question of, lots of questions came up about, what about these women? Of course, these were typically rooms full of men asking, what about these women, except for this one gal. And so, again, 1978, one of the test questions was, well, what's the dress code? What do we tell them the dress code is? And Carolyn Huntoon, wise soul that she was, looked up and said, well, what do you tell the men their dress code is? And the answer, of course, was, oh, you never tell an astronaut what they're going to wear. Well, I think you have your answer. But these are women. Well, they're about to be astronauts. So if they're not rules, it's good judgment. There you go. One other quick one, and then I'd like to tell a slightly longer anecdote to illustrate one of the challenges I think we need to continue to be aware of and work on. Being introduced on the public speaking stage was always amusing. It still is, but even a little more so back then. And it was not uncommon to have someone say to you, and here she is, the 5'6", 125-pound Kathy Sullivan. And the best retort, and I have to credit my classmate Sally Ride, who has very fast synapses on this thing. She was introduced in that fashion one time. And came to the podium and said, well, I would like to thank the 160-pound, 6'5", John so-and-so for that wonderful introduction. The little larger story that I certainly learned some things from and carry with me to this day. I was partly suited up walking across the pool deck out where we simulate spacewalks in large water tanks. You retreat to locker rooms, you put on the cooling garment, sort of the long underwear, if you will, that you're going to wear inside the suit. You walk out, your 300-pound spacesuit is bolted to a rack, and you squirm into it and seal all the bits, and you go underwater. We're going to be testing Hubble Space Telescope servicing procedures that day. I'm on the crew that's going to deploy the Hubble telescope at that time, and this is one of our pivotal tasks, is make sure that we have every tool that will ever be needed to repair the Hubble, and we have proven they work. We know how to choreograph the EVAs. It's all written down, and anyone who picks up a Hubble assignment can count on everything they need to have working will work. So I have a fingerprint on every single good image the Hubble telescope has ever taken, thanks to that. So Bruce McCandless and I had the charge of building that toolkit and the repair manual and ensuring there was a cadre beyond the two of us. That had some experience, direct contact with the telescope, and a knowledge base that would assure mission success beyond us right before we launched the telescope. So I had invited in a very young new guy from a class or two junior to me, very capable, long since flown multiple shuttle flights and station flights. He's lucky. He's getting to do a Hubble telescope run. He's not done much tank training. This is a really good deal for him to get exposure and get a chance to do this. And I'm much senior to him. And we're walking across the pool deck, and I'm about to turn to him and give him I've got every confidence in you. This is a big run, high visibility, high stakes. Good to get this right. I'm glad to have you here. I'm sure you can be a player in this, the buck-up speech. And he figuratively sort of throws out an elbow at me and essentially says the equivalent of, I'll beat you to the corner. Sort of the competitive, bet you can't. And I was shocked. And being senior to him, I could stop that moment, and I did, and said, what's that? And he said all the things I was about to say. It's a big run, it's high visibility, I'm really fortunate to be here, we really got to do our best, and I'm punching you to buck you up to do our best. This is how I spur you in a constructive way to do your best. So the lesson I took from that is there was actually, in all sincerity, the identical common and constructive intent. The way of going about it was completely different. The way each would have reacted, and did react, to the other spur would be read differently. But the intent was the same, and it was the right intent. So in what ways do we urge and spur and challenge each other forward? And in what ways do we misconstrue because of the style of doing that, the intent of doing that? I've seen that at sea as well, and my other favorite story is a much senior guy to me, who an established chief scientist on research missions, oceanographic research missions for many years, who kind of really hated the sort of hand-to-hand combat of fighting out the cruise plan, who gets what times, and then every day as you take stock of what happened, you do a replan for the next day, and it would be everyone around the chart board arguing ferociously, and often with elbows thrown out about that science is crummy and that instrument's terrible, and he can't keep that stuff working anyway, so don't give him any time. He really was the kind of personality who didn't like that, but he relished doing excellent science. And he thought it was the one and only way that you sort of winnowed out the best ideas and proved them up. So it was the necessary means to excellence, and he valued excellence. And there came a time in his career where he was going out as a senior scientist with a woman chief scientist for the first time. He didn't take part in any of the cruise planning. He sent his graduate students to do that. So it's one of the replanning evenings at sea, the first time he's watching how this is being done. And people come around the chart table, and they're listening to each other. Everyone's allowed to complete their sentences. No one's tearing down the other person's work. They're just arguing affirmatively for the value or the purpose of their work. They're sometimes even saying, well, I take that point, but. And he was astonished. He'd never seen it done like this. But a few days in, he had to realize, he acknowledged to himself, he'd never seen such fabulous science being done. And he'd never so enjoyed being at sea and working on science as he did in that climate. His punchline was also an important one. Until that day, and until he experienced excellence down a different path, if you had said to him, take Lori along, she wants to go to sea, but she really doesn't like to fight and scream, what he would have heard was, lower your standards. Because he only knew one way to excellence. So the thought I would leave with you, and Lori's remarks in some ways touched on this, we are different in the workplace. We are different intrinsically. We bring those differences to the workplace, whether they're cultural differences or gender differences. They get snapshotted as tending to be overly modest or not sufficiently assertive. We snapshot some things. Many of us can spot times where we're pulling our punches. We're being less assertive than we maybe would like to be because we think you sort of have to fit kind of in here and not be too overly assertive. Interestingly, that's often true when we should be advocating for ourselves, but watch us be ferocious when we're advocating for a team worker, a teammate, or a coworker. And one could say these are deficiencies in women's approach to leadership. But I would say they are also failures of our organizations and institutions to properly value the very, very positive dimensions of the attributes that we bring to the table, and to find ways to exploit and apply those to delivering the kind of value and purpose, mission accomplishment, innovation that our organization should be about. So what we've got, in a sense, is an ingrained tendency to define quite narrowly what constitutes talent, what constitutes leadership, and what constitutes the right or effective ways to display those attributes. We have to open that filter. I think we do that partly by our example and our advocacy. I think we need to do it increasingly by those of us who've had the opportunity to move to senior positions of influence and some power, to be more not just mentors and counselors to women coming along the way, but frankly and crisply advocates, speaking up for the talents and speaking up for the value of the style, and speaking up for the unimportance of the differences that many will react to on the surface. Thank you.
Kitty, please.
I knew Kathy was a hard act to follow, but I want to actually build on two things that you said. One, expectations. Another, I think, the culture of the workplace we have and how that impacts not only innovation, but who feels welcome there. And in the work I've done, I've had opportunities to see how expectations, particularly around engineering, often color who feels welcomed. And I can give you a couple very quick anecdotes. I had a young woman just the year before last who had applied to many engineering schools, and her preferred, which was a very good engineering school, will remain nameless, had chosen to question her when her application came in and admissions department came by and said, you know, you have the perfect credentials in terms of engineering. She had like a 4.0. She'd taken all the coursework, but you're ahead of your debate team. This is a true story. And you seem a little too well-rounded for an engineer. So we want to know if you really want to be an engineer. How would you answer that question? And so her mother, who happened to know me, said, you need to talk to her. And I said, you know, this is crazy. If you look at all the work we talk about being able to communicate, teamwork and everything, we need engineers who can communicate. So, but it was very interesting that at the age of 17, she was being asked to define herself in terms of an expectation that had nothing to do in terms of her ambition, what she did, the fact that she was the head of the debate team, the fact that she communicated well, I would argue would add to her value. But seeing that way and how quickly we often will challenge people, do you belong or not belong? And then I was at an engineering meeting a couple years ago, and we, 9 women, we got in a large van taxi and got into it, and we're going out to dinner, and we're having a great time. Talking, we knew each other well, and about halfway to the restaurant, the taxi driver turned around and said, are you all flight attendants? Just off, I have no idea, and we just, he regrets to this day that he said that. But it was a very interesting conversation about why would you go there? And the assumptions we make in terms of how that impacts and how you see each other. And then, again, a couple of years ago, I was on a flight from DCA to Chicago, got into the wrong seat. Someone else, turns out they double booked us, so they moved me to another seat. And, 6 a.m. flight, no one's awake. And it ended up that they sat me next to Meg Whitman. And I was wide awake enough to realize who she was. And we started having this conversation, and I could tell that she really didn't know if I knew who she was. And then we started talking about women in technology. And she actually there had been, in policy and expectations, and there had been an article, I think in the New York Magazine, about sexism, and even the highest levels of leadership, looking at Hillary Clinton and other examples. And she had actually underlined all the different parts of this article, and she gave it to me. So it's a really interesting article to think about that. And you think about someone, no matter how you feel about her politics, her work at eBay and now elsewhere, it's interesting to think about the expectations that often women have to address, and people of color, in terms of, do I belong and do I have the right skill set? And I want to then just twist that into, there was an engineering dean's meeting last November in Beijing, and on the flight back, I happened to be, it's a long flight too, so poor person probably wished she wasn't seated next to me, but it happened to be head of one of the heads of Asia for Apple, and I see lots of Apple products here. We had this very interesting conversation that Steve Jobs had just recently passed, and we were talking about their whole philosophy at Apple, and he was explaining to me that they really don't believe in multitasking, that you have 3 tasks that you're assigned to, and that's what you do, and you do them well. And if you need more time, you can ask for more time. And you think about our expectations. That's a very different philosophy than a lot of the institutions I represent in this room. But then you think about those who then, if you are someone who works on that, what expectations do you have about what support structures you provide those people who may or may not be multitasking? He also said the expectation is to give you more than 110% on those 3 tasks. But when you think about that, and you think about the fact that we still have a lot of agencies and entities that don't have expectations in terms of understanding that there are different work and career patterns. If you look right now, the Society of Women Engineers did a study recently that shows women engineers tend to drop out of the workforce after the age of 30. We still don't have a lot of women engineers in the workforce at the level that we could potentially get. And I think a lot of that has to go, what are the expectations of our institutions about what role you can provide, and when do you always have to be full throttle or 110%? Or are there times when you're not going to be that way, but you still have a lot to bring to the plate? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Marcia.
So I am a space policy analyst, and I have been a space policy analyst since the 1970s. So I've seen a lot of innovation and change in many spheres, including information technology, which has really changed how policy analysts do their job. But in terms of being a policy analyst in the space field, things have changed, but I was particularly impressed by Lori's statistics early on about how much progress is being made in bringing women into aerospace. But when you look at the total numbers, it's still a very small percentage of women in this field. Back in the 70s, when I got started, I could easily go to meeting after meeting after meeting and be the only woman in the room. And now I can go to meeting after meeting and maybe there's 3 women in the room. So, you know, it's a great increase, but we've got to really move out on that. I worked at the Congressional Research Service up on Capitol Hill, and in the 70s, there actually were 4 of us who worked in the space field. 3 of us were women, and the leader of the team was a man, Charles Sheldon. And for those of you who weren't around in the 1970s, you probably won't get the joke, but because the 3 of us were women and we were working for Charles, we got to be known as Charlie's Angels. I'm still not sure how I feel about that because Charlie's Angels were really hot-looking women, and I didn't mind the comparison so much. But it was a way that the mostly male aerospace community could deal with the fact that there were 3 women working in this topic. So it was interesting to get started in aerospace at the time, and it was frustrating for me because wherever I went, people would say, "Oh, are you an engineer?" And I'm not an engineer, I'm a political scientist, which is a very good background if you want to be a policy analyst. But when I was with Charles, they never asked Charles what his background was. He was a man, and they assumed that he was an engineer. He wasn't, he was an economist. And he got into space by circuitous routes, just like many of us have done. So there were a lot of frustrations being in the aerospace field back in those days. And I do believe that out of every adversity comes an opportunity. And in 1984, there were a whole bunch of us, about 200 people, in a hotel ballroom waiting to see an Ariane launch vehicle be launched from Kourou, French Guiana. They have these launch parties where you all get there, and it's like, you know, we think you can, and that launch vehicle often goes off. But in this case, there was a very long delay, a 4-hour delay. So here was this room full of about 200 people, of which 6 of us were women. And we were standing around looking at all the men, chatting with one another, doing all their networking, and there were the 6 of us women. So we decided, enough of this old boys club, we needed an old girls club. And that became the foundation of an organization known as Women in Aerospace. And it has become a tremendous organization over the years. I encourage all of you to join WIA. It's amazing to see what can come out of an idea that starts in such humble settings. And now Women in Aerospace offers mentoring sessions and all sorts of opportunities for young women coming up in aerospace to learn the ropes and to learn how to do the kind of networking that's going to get them to advance in their careers. So I think of all the things that has happened in my own career, the thing that I'm proudest of was being part of the organization of WIA. Join.
Veronica.
Well, good morning. Is my voice coming through? I've been a little ill, and I keep thinking I have to have my voice for Thursday. I think I'm there. You know, I come from a different background. I'm an attorney by trade, worked at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And one thing that I do know is common is as an attorney, it's sometimes assumed that a younger woman will maybe not have as much to say. And when I got this SES position at OPM, the one thing I recognized walking through the door is there was a real questioning of whether I had earned this or whether I had gotten it because of who I knew. And I think that happens in all of our fields. As professional women, we're judged by how we look, what we chose to wear, how we come across to people. I am surprised to find out in my new role that I am both one of the nicest people that people know and also one of the most difficult. I hear that as well. And so whenever a woman decides to assert herself or to disagree with a statement that's been made and to do it strongly, oftentimes we're seen as being difficult. I had an incident recently. I was not in a senior staff meeting, but they were talking about something related to a program that I had been working on. And afterwards, the director of OPM and the chief of staff came to me and said, let's solve this. You know, we're giving it to you. Let us know what we can do to support the effort. And I talked to one of the other office directors, and she says to me, "You're taking it too personally. Why are you taking this personally?" Because I had said we needed an advocate there at that meeting to make sure that this issue wasn't turned on its head. And I said to her, this isn't about what's personal. This is about making sure that this program is run correctly. And oftentimes, I think we need to feel comfortable being in the workplace and collaborating when we want to, but also being difficult when we need to. And those are things that I think we're still struggling with as women in the workplace because of expectations, because of stereotypes. I'm reminded of, there was one case, and for some reason it's leaving my memory right now, but the whole case was based on the fact that she was called a bitch because she was so assertive in the workplace. They didn't want to promote her because they said she was too much like a man. And it was about stereotyping and our expectations about how we engage in the workplace. And I think those are issues that cut across. And then when you add elements of other diversity as well, what are our educational backgrounds? Where did we go to school? Are some places considered better? Are you more qualified when you have a degree from one school or another school? And all of those things do impact innovation. Right? If we all went to the same schools, heard from the same professors, what kind of innovation is really going to be brought in when we're all hired to the same organization? When I was an intern at the White House, I was asked to stay after I'd gotten a fellowship from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and they said, is there any way you could stay on as an intern here and do the fellowship? And I couldn't do it. I had gotten the technology fellowship. It was something new that they were trying to do because of how I had talked about technology gaps, the need to get women into STEM fields, the need to get minorities access to these same kinds of degrees in the technology. Not that I had that kind of background. I too had a political science background. But I was told, let's get you an interview with the director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And I went to speak to, after having spoken to someone who would have been my supervisor, who said, I'm on board, let's just get the approval from the director. And when the director met me, one of his questions was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I paused only because I was thinking, I'm interviewing with this office. He doesn't want to hear that I want to go to law school, right? So I was just thinking for a minute, how do I best formulate this response? And it must have been 10 seconds before he said, and I don't mean in terms of getting married and having children. And it was at that moment that I thought, yeah, I'm not getting this job. I'll just continue and tell him, yeah, I'm thinking of going to law school. So those are the things we still see. And what can we do about it? I have one more story I want to tell. I won't tell you. There was a foreign government that came to visit at the Office of Personnel Management to ask us what we were doing in varying areas. And the question was about disability hiring. And I said, we're also running this extensive diversity and inclusion program. We have an executive order. Would you like for us to share some information there? And they said, oh, no, we don't need to hear about that. We're all set. We don't have any diversity issues. I said, really? So you have women are represented at 50% in your workforce? And they said, oh, well, no. And I said, and your senior executives are the equivalent? What's the participation rate there? And they said, well, we're almost at parity. We're at about 30%. And so, I'm pretty sure this country also has, roughly 49% men, women, right? So that's sometimes where we are too. We're willing to accept progress, as was discussed earlier, and say that we've arrived, rather than looking at it like we have made progress, but there are still gaps. There are still variances between where we are today and where we will be when we truly achieve equality between the sexes. And I think with that, I've said more than I should. When I found out I was following this esteemed panel, I was actually happy I was at the end, because all I could think is they'll have heard so much good information. I can listen and figure out what I'm going to say and maybe sound a little smarter. So.
Thank you. And please feel free to come up to the microphone in the center or use the microphones for questions on each end. We do have some tweeted questions and emailed questions. Ellen Gilmer asks, what year was the pantsuit memo? I'll answer that one, 1970. But at Women in Aero from Langley asks, can each of you say what was your personal pantsuit memo?
I can do that one. Because I started my career in the field sciences as a geologist and an oceanographer. And this carries all the way forward into shuttle time. And another equivalent of the pantsuit memo is, well, you can't come out into the field, a critical set of experiences if you're going to be a geologist or an oceanographer, but you can't come out in the field. And the reason is because we don't know how or where you would go to the bathroom. On one large ship that I worked on, there was one cabin for the chief scientist, and should the odd thing happen that a woman was the chief scientist, she would have that cabin. So that would work because it had an ensuite bathroom. We can understand that. There was another pair of cabins far forward in the ship that had a bathroom between them, so that meant up to 4 women could go aboard as well because there were 2 bunks in each cabin. Now, mind you, you're standing watches all over the ship. We were working in the North Atlantic. The laboratory area where I was typically working was about 250 feet aft and a few decks down, and the only pathway, there were 2 pathways there. One was inside the ship but went through the berthing quarters for the essentially all-male crew, and so we were not supposed to use that passageway. Actually, the scientists were not supposed to use that passageway at all because the crew was sleeping at odd times, and that left outside on open decks. So there was actually a bathroom right about where this podium was. We were supposed to make our way 250 feet across open decks and high seas to use the bathroom between the 2 cabins. Needless to say, that never happened. But so that was the attitude of we don't know how you will do this, and therefore you can't come.
Wow. I would say 2 quick things. My first job, my freshman year out of college, was working in the U.S. Capitol. And I was at a women's college, Mount Holyoke College, and I came in, had a wonderful experience, but the poker tables would come out on Friday. And it was a very different orientation in terms of expectation. There were actually a few senators at that time, including Berta, West Virginia, who at that time, or had maybe recently stopped requiring women to wear skirts in their office, and this is in the mid-late 70s. And then fast forward to a couple years ago, I happened to be at the meeting of the infamous Harvard president at the time in Cambridge, where he did state that women really don't want to work 80 hours a week, and that there were reasons that having to do with biological and other reasons why women weren't in science and engineering. It was very interesting because there were about 30 of us in that room, and you just kind of looked around the table, and I think we're all going, not obviously, did you hear that? Did we do it? And it was one of these things where you just think, okay, can people really still believe that in positions of power?
Thank you.
Well, I didn't get a pantsuit memo, but I did get the pantsuit lecture when I was at the Congressional Research Service my first year. So it was the mid-1970s, and pantsuits were just becoming popular. And it was a woman who came and spoke to me in very stern terms, telling me that it was inappropriate to wear pantsuits. And I confess I did not heed her advice. She was a very nice woman. She was one of the senior women in the division. And she was, much older than me, and she did not feel it was, I don't think any of the men there were complaining about it, but she as a woman was affronted that I would be wearing pantsuits to the office. I did not heed her advice. I continued to wear pantsuits, but I must confess I remember that conversation to this day.
And I have to say, the lady who issued the pantsuit memo at Goddard did send a woman who was the head of procurement at Goddard, who recently retired in the 1970s, sent this lady home because her shirt was a bit too short and showed a bit of her belly button, so she was sent home from work. Veronica.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I was at a job interview in the late 1990s, and the gentleman said to me, I don't really see why they sent your resume forward. I know we're trying to do more on diversity, so that might have something to do with it. And it was a heavily male-dominated agency, I'll say that. And I thought, maybe not somewhere I want to work at this time.
Thank you.
And I feel like I gave several of my anecdotes, the most meaningful one being that in high school I didn't take calculus and the boys did because the high school math teachers just didn't believe I would ever want to. So my anecdote will be on the other side. They're all Facebook friends of mine now, all those 5 boys who took calculus. And you're like, seriously? The deputy administrator of NASA, you didn't even take calculus.
Any
So
questions?
sometimes that determination
Yes.
will just, you can overcome it.
That's right. Any questions from the audience? While you're coming up to the mic or raising your hand, we have an emailed question from a 19-year-old college student here in DC, and wanting to know the panel's thoughts on why there are still careers that seem to be majority women, like nursing and that kind of thing. Do we see those kinds of things fading away or changing in the future?
There are a lot more men going into nursing. I mean, it's actually quite interesting. If you look at the sex-segregated careers, there's a lot of changes happening, and I can't tell you the exact statistics, but there is a tremendous more growth now of men going into nursing, particularly from some of the jobs that are no longer being from the Rust Belt and other states where they don't have that opportunities for that type of employment. But what's interesting, if you look actually in engineering, there's certain fields of engineering where women are more well represented, like chemical or biomedical. And mechanical and electrical still have the smallest number of women engineers, and like aerospace. In terms of teaching, you again get huge differences in terms of what's being taught and what level. While women are the majority of the teachers, you will still see certain fields where you tend to get more male teachers than female teachers. So there still is some differences, but I think those things are changing. We still haven't really been able to get up much more above 20% overall in terms of undergraduate degrees in engineering for women.
And I would just put a little complimentary note in the corporate sector. The class of 2013 at Harvard Business School at Wharton are projected to be 45% female and have been for a while. So the pipeline, one could argue, is decently filled. It's not 50, but that's a respectable number. From in 2007, 44% of the MBAs awarded went to women. That's up 75% over 10 years ago. Again, off of small numbers to start with, but a rate of change. But that's not translating, that still is not translating into comparable progress in the workforce. So at the Fortune 500 company level, 3% of CEOs are female, and if you broaden that out and look at the so-called C-suite executives and boards of directors, it's less than 15% of the executives and board members at top companies, according to the research group Catalyst. So I think to many of the points that were made during our anecdotes, there is the challenge of attracting students to different fields to study and getting enough who persist and get through and developing your skills in something in which you can build a career or a profession is sort of deliberately a big mountain. It is a growth chance. It's not meant to be an easy walk through on a sunny day through a park. It does challenge you. It does require discipline and persistence. But we're doing better in many fields on the pipeline, notable exceptions in physics and engineering. It's still not translating into institutions to the degree that it should.
So in my view, we have another topic none of us have addressed. I'd be interested if people agree. Typically, women's fields, nursing, teaching, you can imagine teaching with its schedule, has a natural draw. I have felt, as we try to not only address cultural barriers, glass ceiling barriers, as we do better with the pipeline and so forth, we have to address within engineering, and that was such an interesting categorization with engineering, what we go into. It seems to me that women tend to be, of course, there are always all exceptions to all these things, very interested in doing something that makes a difference. Absolutely. They want to see, I know I've felt this way about the value of space. What I like about space tends to be very different than what a lot of people at NASA and engineers like about it. They want to build a big rocket. I want to make the world a better place. And that rocket gets things into space that helps make the world a better place, and I am committed to it. But we haven't done a good job explaining how the engineer makes that happen. And nursing is something that, right out of the blocks, boy, you are making a difference. I'm sure you go home every day while exhausted, feeling like you probably made a difference. And I think we could do maybe more in helping to communicate the value of what we do in aerospace to encourage women to see, and in engineering beyond just aerospace, what a difference engineers make and how much of a contribution they make to a better world.
Absolutely. I think we have a question from the audience over there.
Well, she was at a mic, too.
Over there, and then we'll get to the mic.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naya Williams, and I'm an 8th grader from Howard University Middle School. And I know that all of you have had to prove yourself worthy to be in the fields that you are in and have been in to everyone around you. So I wanted to know, who is that ultimate cheerleader who was there for you no matter what?
I'll just start off. I've talked about before you guys arrived, my mom, but my dad too. And there are a couple of you in this room, Marcia Smith on the panel, Linda Billings, Carol Lane. I see a bunch of you. So you've been here since that Women in Aerospace meeting. I wasn't at Marcia, but joined right away. Women in Aerospace gave me my baby shower. I was president of Women in Aerospace twice, and those of you who've been down this path have really, really helped, and I've always felt your support.
So that's a great question. I want to make sure we don't make it sound too hard, because we're telling stories about our experiences, living a life in a complex society as a human being, and that is about discovering yourself and about proving yourself, no matter what pathway you take. So the questions, the challenges that we've been talking about, well, let me assure you, if you thought you could pick a different path through life and not have these questions, that doesn't happen. Wherever you are on a road of life, you're going to find questions like this that you are challenged to grow through. So don't make more of the challenges that we're talking about than is worth making of them. I would echo what Lori said. Your parents can make a big difference, and if you do have an interest, if you're a girl that does have an interest and an ability in science and technology, I think how your father looks at you plays a very big role. My dad was an aerospace engineer. My mother never worked outside the home. I've got strong bits of both of them, so I probably would have flunked that too narrow a person test to be an engineer. But I felt very clearly from a very young age that anything I was interested in, it was legitimate for me to be interested in it. It was legitimate for me to want to explore how far my curiosity and how far my skill might take me. My challenge and my obligation was to try hard and assess myself well. You're going to be good at some things and not at others, and be honest with yourself about when did you find a strength and when did you just find a bit of a weakness. That's important to know yourself, but no one got to edit. No one was entitled to edit in advance what I was allowed to be interested in, and that was so ingrained in me through our household that I like to say that I got a long ways down the road on ignorance is bliss. It never occurred to me, it absolutely never occurred to me, that if someone walked up to me and said, you can't be a geologist basically because I've never seen anyone who looks like you be one, it never occurred to me that that was a relevant statement. I can try, and I'll show you what I can do, and my works will speak for themselves, and I would just plow on, quite unwitting and sort of ignoring it. So it's not a bad technique.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll move on to the next question in the interest of time. In the middle, Mike.
Yes, so we talked a bit about the memos that we received, and I'm also curious about the memos that we send. And for me, I spent most of my 20s living my life waiting for people to approve of my ideas, to give me permission to do my ideas, to say that this is good enough, go ahead and do it. And then in the last few years, I realized, like, no, that's not how it should work. I should take the first step and I should lead. And so in the last few months, I, with 4 friends, incorporated a company to use drones to deliver healthcare goods, and incorporating a startup to do open source collaboration of space technology, where we can build the smaller spacesuit probably for really cheap. And you know, all of this is new to me. It's scary. I realized that a lot of men don't have these doubts. Am I good enough? Do I have the skills to do this? They just do it. So I just did it. And so I'm wondering, for you, what was the moment of empowerment when you took yourself out of a position of waiting for others to approve and say you're good enough, and just did, and hopefully found people that you began to lead? Because I feel like that's where we're really going to change things. When we're heads of our own companies, we can set the rules about work-life balance or clothing. That's when things change. And so it's a question about entrepreneurship and leadership in that moment of empowerment.
Thank you. Veronica, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. So they've done a lot of study, neuroscience-wise, to find some stereotypes, as I like to call them. There is a tendency, based on what we've learned through childhood, where men will instantly think, let's go for it, what can I do? There's no sense of editing oneself, and they find that women do tend to edit themselves. When they study why we do it, they're not completely sure. They think it might have something to do with the way our circuitry was being developed as we were getting older and as children. But we do tend to seek that outside voice telling us we can move forward. I think what we've heard the panelists talk a lot about today, though, will make the difference. When we stop listening and we don't self-edit, but we recognize that it is our opportunity to take hold of anything that we want to do. In this regard, we look at the way women's career paths go, and if women don't have children, they're actually much more similar to men's career paths. When women have children, you see the blip, and you'll see them where they took time off, and then you will see where they go back into the workforce, and then it will often plateau. And we can see this in the statistics, especially in government, in the higher grade levels, and then when we're entering into the SES. And some of that means, and this is what I take from it, one is, what are we doing to self-edit ourselves? And then how are we allowing society to dictate what it means if we have to take 6 months when we have our children to make sure that, you know, our children are being cared for? What does it mean when we have to care for our elderly parents? And what does that mean in the workforce? The studies are also showing that where women are in senior level positions, you have better workplace policies. And, you know, those are for self-evident reasons, certainly, but everyone benefits from it. So just kind of giving you the free flow of all the research that's out there.
Can I add just very quickly? So most innovators, most people who have entrepreneurial skills, they fail. And I guess I'd like to talk to the students here, kind of tying the two questions about cheerleader, is you really have to believe in yourself. So how many of you have tried to learn a new dance step or a new athletic thing or a new activity and you just stunk at it? Have you ever had that happen? Ever? It's the same thing with your dreams or innovation or trying to do a new drone, is that you're not going to always succeed. Every invention, including the iPad, everything, it didn't succeed the first time. So part of that cheerleader has to, whether it's coming from your mother or whomever, has to be coming internally. And so I think with the interesting difference that the studies Kauffman Foundation has done between men and women entrepreneurs is men are serial entrepreneurs. If they fall down, they pick it up themselves up and they get going, where there's something often in women that we tend to think, okay, I fell down, I can't get back up. And so that's the biggest thing I would say is you have to believe in yourself. You need to be your own cheerleader.
And can I just add, sorry, that you asked, you know, when did you feel it? And I just have to answer, I still try every day. You try every day.
Absolutely.
In this job, an early address to senior leaders at NASA, 500 of them, our whole SES forum, I talked about how I knew I didn't look like most of them. I didn't have the same background as them. I didn't think like them. But I did think and look like a majority of the voting public who pay us, like the people who are making decisions. And our head of communications after that, who was a man, said, I never want to hear you say that. You are the deputy administrator of NASA. You should not have to be justifying you looking at me. I work on it every day. I sit in meetings with primarily men and don't say things they might think that I speak every time that I think about it, but I don't. And I am well aware that they are keeping track of whether or not I am going to make a point on that. And I feel like you never get, at least I have never gotten to a plateau where I've decided it's okay. And I continue to have to work on it.
Thank you.
And if I could just add one thing, I also am still working on that empowerment thing. And I spent 31 years in one job. It was a great job. I loved it. Then I went over to the National Academy of Sciences. I was there for 3 years. I loved it. It was a great place to work. But what I had really wanted to do was to be this entrepreneur who set up an objective, nonpartisan website about space policy. Websites don't make a lot of money, but you need to make some money from it. And so I've been working on it now for 3 years, and the portion of it that might actually earn money, I'm still waiting on it because I'm doing all this self-checking. Well, is it perfect yet? Is it perfect yet? My boyfriend of 18 years spent his life in the private sector. He is an entrepreneur, and he is frustrated out of his mind because I don't just do it. So I can see every single day the difference between the way he thinks of entrepreneurship and the way I think of entrepreneurship, and I do agree I need to get off the dime.
Thank you. And we had a question over here.
Is it on? Yes. Hi, I'm Daphne. I'm a young professional at NASA. I didn't know that women were only 1/3% of the workforce. So I think I'm going to walk down the halls high-fiving every woman I pass. But my question is about the boys' club. I mean, how do you deal with it? Do you approach the group? Do I need to learn football stats? Because, I mean, I feel like wherever I go, there's always going to be kind of that boys' club. I mean, it's social, but it's also professional in nature as well. I mean, I just wonder what your experiences are with that kind of situation.
I've got 2 sons that help a lot. We talk about football in the boys club a lot at NASA. We have fan day. I wear my jersey. So probably it's just a coping mechanism to be able to have some common ground to get along. In my community, an email went out that our local pool was going to have a golf outing, and I was excited and signed up and scrolled down to the bottom and said, oh, we'll meet the wives and children at the pool afterwards. Females weren't even invited today. I replied to all, what do you think this is, Burning Tree? This is a community pool down the road. We will not be having this. They didn't change their policy. Women were not able to play golf on this tournament. And the next year, I so embarrassed them because when they came back to the pool, I handed out curlers and trays of food, and the young girls and none of my friends' moms really wanted to be this mean. Oh, when the boys came off the golf course, let's help feed them, and we'll help them. I try to use humor, a little bit of snarkiness there, and the next year I got invited. I made sure to play with one of my doctor friends so we could be competitive, and we have played every year. This was in the year that Martha Burke, the president of NOW, had tried to open the Open to Annika Sorensen, and we all had visors with Martha Burke's picture on them, and now we're the Lady Burkes, and we play every year, and I'm so thrilled because we're not the only female foursome. We've got some younger folks in the neighborhood who will play. So you work whatever you can, from trying to be a part of it to just sometimes I can't help it, but be a little snarky.
Mm-hmm.
But don't ignore it.
Yes, one more comment, and then we have 3 questions here. These will be our last 3 because of time, but yes.
Sure. You know, one thing I wanted to add is we do have this government-wide plan to increase diversity and inclusion in the workplace, right? And inclusion is about making connections that don't usually exist. One of the ways you can do that is affinity groups. And what the studies have found is that affinity groups for women do better than almost any others, and that you actually do see women rising through the ranks because of those affinity groups. There's also employee resource groups where people get to work together across different interests. Important because it's going to be men and women from different areas in an organization that get to share similarities. And when you can form those similarities and find those similarities, you're able to come up through it together. And finally, mentoring. Whenever you can find those formalized or informal opportunities, that's a really important way of establishing those connections.
Thank you. Question in the middle.
Hi, my name is Malat Mesman. I just finished my PhD in bioengineering. So I'm in one of the engineering fields where women aren't as underrepresented as some of the others. And so it's been really inspiring today to hear some of your stories and just the nature of when you guys entered your professional fields. You faced so many overt challenges that I feel like the younger generation doesn't always experience, but they're still there. The challenges are there, they're just not the pantsuit memo necessarily. And so I guess my question is, I was involved in a graduate organization for women in science and engineering at my graduate school, and I was really shocked at how few students actually came out, how few women. It was a handful of people that came to a lot of events, but a lot of women didn't necessarily care about these issues or care about joining together. And so I guess I wanted to know your comments about how to challenge maybe the younger generation to have the same interest in helping women not really settle for progress, but to really strive for equality.
Let's see. Kitty, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think that one of the issues we have to acknowledge is our experiences are our experiences, and that the experiences that those of you who are now in school or in university might be very different. But I think there is a very interesting website called the Implicit Bias Test. And I can be glad to share with you the website. And what it shows is that we all have assumptions about people. And I think what you'll find is that there may not be as many assumptions while you're at school in terms of what you can or cannot do. But when you start going into workplaces, they have different cultures. And so I think the conversations and the support structures you need may differ, but whether the affinity group is, the Black engineering group or the women engineering group or whatever, I think we all need counsel, and it's good to have places where you can go and raise issues and get advice and seek that. And my expectation is that the conversations that the students might have now might be very different when they go off to university or go off to workforce. So this is more our set of experiences, and they're compass points, but your compass and where your direction might be very different. And I think from that, I would say is use the tools you need to be successful, knowing that you may have a very different situation.
I would just add that I've seen the same thing. There is some progress, and it's comforting. And so the signals of what the mountain is like, what mountain needs to be climbed, and where the blockades are, the signals are more subtle. They're harder to detect. They were very clear when we came along. And I think that does relax young women to some degree through their school years. I hope they join together and wake up and start challenging the current memos and barriers when they do get into the workplace and make the progress they deserve.
It's really the major point behind this day. And this, as Rebecca led it over the last few months and she reported on senior management, we're well aware how it's viewed by men. Why, we're a little tired of hearing about it, I'm sure. It's okay. It's okay. We can keep doing it, and you guys just being here makes me glad that we invested in the time in doing it.
I think women as leaders, I know you all have taken it on as a real responsibility to know that you are a leader and you are a woman, and that's okay. And it's okay to focus on both of those identities and encourage other women to also be okay with that and honestly not have to be men.
Hi, my name is Marsha Cole, and I'm a PhD candidate at Louisiana State University and a NASA student ambassador. And my question is, most of us are at phases where we're going to be transitioning in our lives, whether we're going from elementary to middle, middle to high, high to college, different phases, and college to grad school, medical school, whatever professional school that you're interested in. And I'm at the point where I'm soon going to be a working professional, and I have to retire from my lifelong commitment to academics, I guess, and as being the receiver in that way. And I wanted to know, how did you guys, I guess, accept being the first and getting over that anxiety that comes with no one has done this before? Because many of us may come from families that don't have the same type of professionals that look like us or can mentor us or even provide advice. So how did you, get over being the first to walk in space? How did you get over that?
So I had found along the way, there were no role models who looked like me in the things that I was interested in. And I somehow very happily and helpfully never felt that mattered. That I can't learn about courage from some man that did something. I can't learn about integrity from an African-American leader who turned a country around in South Africa. I can't learn a lesson from Nelson Mandela because he doesn't look like me. I mean, it's nonsense. So there were all around me, I felt, people I could learn from. And there are things to learn on the emulate this, try to be as strong or good or smart as that. And there are don't ever do it this way lessons. And those lessons they are all around you. So yes, I do have the distinction of being the first American woman in space. I can't tell you anything about what it means to be first because it was my first spacewalk. I could have been the 7,000th woman to do a spacewalk. And there's nothing about how I prepared for that task and got myself ready and made sure that I could do what we needed to do out there. There's nothing about that I could imagine doing differently as a function of whether I was first or 31st or 901st. So you might try it that way. You're doing your first things. It actually doesn't matter whether the peanut gallery has seen one before or not. It's your first learning curve. Own it and take it and grow through it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's go to our final question.
Hi, my name is Leona Fan Chang. I have a different type of question. It's a little broader. I work with LaRouche Pack. I'm a researcher. And we put out, and the organization I work with put out a program back in the 80s now for a 50-year program to go to colonize Mars. And it was called Women on Mars. And the idea was to encompass all of the economic activities under a major space program that would challenge all the frontiers and basically not only scientifically but culturally. And the idea was to sort of get man to grow out of its adolescence. And it's at this point now that I'm very worried because there's I've seen all these cuts. Now we've made cuts we cut Constellation. Now there's an explicit attack on anything manned Mars, and so on. I just wonder if you guys have given some thought to this subject as far as our future in space.
Oh, I think Lori's given a little bit of thought to this. So, Lori.
In my view, there is absolutely no overt or otherwise attack on humans on Mars or in space. In fact, I would argue that our policies have absolutely been structured to advance the time when women and men will live and work in space and expand space exploration outward. The International Space Station being that toehold to the universe and beyond. Whether our next step is literally a step for a human on an asteroid, as the president has outlined, or back to the moon, as Newt Gingrich has outlined, or to Mars specifically, we need to develop those capabilities in order to do it in a way that does not cost 3 to 6% of the public's tax dollars when we do it. So we're investing in technologies to lower the cost, to be able to have NASA only have to purchase the capabilities from the private sector that we have been doing for 50 years so that there can be even more people in space, not just those paid by the taxpayer. And that will allow NASA to invest its very valuable tax dollars in going further. We have the most robust planetary exploration in the world. We have the most robust human exploration program in the world, as well as Mars exploration program in the world. On the very Mars science laboratory that's headed there now, we have experiments that will test radiation, preparing for the time when humans will walk on Mars. But as we talk here about women, I'll close with my anecdote that I absolutely believe that women will go to Mars. I would probably outline that I would agree with Edward Teller, who once said he was asked once whether women should go to space. And he said he thought about it, and he decided only women should go to space. More brains per pound.
Let's take just 30 seconds for any closing thoughts that you have, Kathy. Anything?
I'd offer my closing thoughts to the young women that have joined us and ask that you take motivation and a sense of the incredible fun of tackling tough challenges and setting high goals, because we've talked about some of the obstacles and amusing frustrations along the way, but I would certainly not trade anything at all for what I've been able to do, who I've been able to work with, the opportunities, the challenges, and the benefits in every single sense, from psychological to emotional to economic. Big challenges are worthwhile, and I'm sure many, many of you are really up to big challenges, and I know we need your talents helping on the big challenges.
Thank you. Kitty.
Well, I would like to build on that. And so the students, I would say, you have a chance right now to meet someone in the audience or someone on the panel and have an opportunity to follow up by email or have an informational interview and have a conversation. And I think part of it is thinking about what you enjoy, what you're interested in, and taking that time. And my challenge is, meet at least one person during the break that you would like to have another conversation with. And I think that, for us, part of what we need to be doing too is making sure we're engaging with the students in our community and giving them an opportunity to learn from us. And I want to just close on one funny note. Follow your dreams, but sometimes as young children, your dreams are not as well articulated. I can tell this. I think my daughter isn't here, so I can tell the story, and this is a true story. We were at an event in Washington, D.C. many years ago, and you know how parents are very proud, and my daughter was with me. It was with, at that time, NASA Administrator Dan Goldman and many other people, and you know how when you're young, and even when you're not young in Washington, what's the first question they ask you? What do you do? So they asked her, what do you want to do? And so, we had prepped her a little bit, but she basically said, well, I'm thinking about being a doctor, maybe a scientist, but what I really want to be is a unicorn. So follow your dreams.
Yes, me too. Marcia.
Well, I would just like to pick up on the discussion earlier about, so who did you really have to depend upon? Who was your cheerleader? Who helped you through all of it? And it's a mixture of all of it, and absolutely you have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you're not going anywhere. And your parents help you a lot, but I urge you to not underestimate girl power. And I would say that my women friends, and some of them are here in the audience, have been the people who have been my cheerleaders through the years. And when I've had really tough, whether it's my personal life or my business life or whatever, they're the people that I've been able to turn to for decades, and we're still all together as a team. And they understand it, they're going through it themselves. You can learn a lot from men, but women understand things differently than men do. So get some really good gal pals and keep them with you through your life.
Thanks. Veronica.
Okay, and I think what I would just add, it's a reiteration of everything that we've heard today. There's no wrong or right way to do something. There's no path that you have to take. There's no order you have to do life in. And so I think we all need to have the flexibility with ourselves to accept that we don't have to hit certain markers by a certain age. We can always kind of shift our desires, our goals, who we are. And if we can listen to our own voice and not worry as much about what everyone else is thinking and saying, because chances are they're probably not really thinking about you. They're probably thinking about themselves. And I think that's a lesson we all have to remind ourselves every day, no matter how old you are, no matter where you are in your career. And once you do that, it will help you fully maximize your potential in whatever you set your goal to do.
Thank you. Lori.
Well, all great messages. I resonate with so much is said there. It reminds me of a friend's mother in college. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, home ec major, and was just so happy to be able to have the opportunity to stay home with us. But this was a woman who was a lawyer, and she told me once, you can have it all, just not at the same time. And I've said that throughout my opportunities to mentor women when I was in grad schools, before I had kids and so forth. But so many of you have asked questions that I think I'm sure everyone on the panel feels as I do. It is just a joy to be able to represent women, and it's a challenge to do it well. And I know that I feel like lots of people have gone before me, but one of the most rewarding aspects of being in my job is being able to do things like this. And as I said in the beginning of my remarks, I came to NASA not wanting to be the woman deputy at NASA. I wasn't the first. Shanna was the first. She did a great job, left a great path. This should not be an issue. It is an issue, as we've talked about today, and it's okay. The very first women's talk I gave was to the Women's Association at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and they had asked for a work-life balance talk, and I had more fun working on that talk, did a top 10 list of things that have allowed me to be able to raise children while having a full-time career. And I have continued to hear from those women, and some of those of you who I've been able to promote and hire at NASA, it's one of the real joys of what we get to do. So as Kathy said, don't let us scare you into thinking it's hard. Sometimes it's a heck of a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Please give a round of applause to our panelists. And now we'll take a break until 11, where you'll go to your breakout rooms. Thank you all.
If you've never been to Duke's place, take your tootsies